Daddy, I've been waiting for you.
Who told you to call me that?
A billionaire ignored a crying child in the rain, but when she shouted one word, his entire life shattered. The car was already moving. The window was halfway up, and for a moment, Ethan Cole almost didn't look back. But that one word didn't sound like a voice. It sounded like a memory he never knew he had. Daddy. Before we continue this story, take a quick second to support the channel, like the video, subscribe if you enjoy emotional stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Ethan Cole was not the kind of man who stopped for strangers. At 45, he had everything people spent their entire lives chasing: power, money, control. His company owned half the skyline: hotels, towers, stadiums. Every deal he touched turned into profit. Hey, people called him brilliant, but the people who knew him before all of that would have used a different word: empty. Because 7 years ago, Ethan had lost the only person who ever made him feel human. Her name was Naomi, and according to everything he believed, she was dead. Not physically, but gone in a way that felt just as final. She had left him. No goodbye, no explanation. Just a letter. Cold, sharp, impossible to argue with. She said he loved power more than people. She said she couldn't stay. And after that, Ethan stopped believing in anything that couldn't be controlled. He buried himself in work. He stopped asking questions. He stopped looking back. And eventually, he became the man sitting in the back of a black Rolls Royce, watching the world like it didn't belong to him anymore. Until that night. Until the rain. Until the sound of a child crying broke through everything he had built. At first, he ignored it. People cry in the city all the time. It wasn't his problem. It wasn't his responsibility. It wasn't his life. Drive, he said. But then, the driver hesitated, and in that small pause, Ethan looked, just once. And that was all it took. A little girl, 6 years old, standing alone beside a broken bus stop, soaked, shivering, holding a piece of cardboard that could barely survive the rain. "Please help my mom." Ethan stared for 2 seconds, then leaned back. Drive. The car moved forward, slowly, quietly, like the moment was already over. But it wasn't, because the girl suddenly stepped closer to the road, closer to the car, closer to him. And then she shouted, "Daddy!" Everything stopped. Not the city, not the rain, not the traffic, just him. And Ethan's breathing changed, slow, then uneven. His hand froze against the leather seat. "Stop the car." The driver didn't ask questions this time. The car stopped instantly. And for the first time in 7 years, Ethan opened the door and stepped into the rain. People turned, not because of the girl, because of him. Ethan Cole did not step into the rain for anyone. But tonight, he wasn't walking toward a stranger. He was walking towards something that made no sense. Something impossible. The girl stood there trembling, eyes wide, afraid she had made a mistake. Ethan crouched down in front of her, rain soaking through his suit. "What did you just say?" he asked. The girl looked down. "I'm sorry." Her voice was small, too small for the weight of what she had said. Ethan studied her face. Not familiar, not obvious, but something. Something didn't feel random. "Why did you call me that?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "My mom showed me your picture." Ethan's chest tightened. "That doesn't mean anything," he said quickly, but his voice didn't sound convincing, not even to himself. She said, "If I ever saw you," the girl continued, her fingers tightening around the wet cardboard, "I shouldn't ask you for anything." That hit harder. Ethan swallowed. "What is your mother's name?" The girl looked up, and for the first time she didn't hesitate. Naomi. The world didn't spin, it narrowed. Everything disappeared, except that name. Naomi. 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of believing she chose to leave. 7 years of never looking back. And now a child was standing in the rain, saying her name like it had never disappeared. Ethan stood up slowly. His body moved before his mind caught up. "Where is she?" he asked. The girl pointed. Across the street, under a dim awning, a woman sat there, head down, one arm wrapped around herself. Still, too still. Ethan didn't wait. He walked into the street. Cars honked, lights flashed, but none of it mattered, because something inside him already knew. Before he even saw her face, before she even looked up, he knew. She was there, and when she lifted her head, everything he believed for 7 years broke in a single second. Naomi, alive, older, thinner, but her. Ethan stopped, not because he wanted to, because his body refused to take another step. "You're alive," he said. It was a stupid sentence, but it was the only one he had. Naomi looked at him. No shock, no surprise, just something tired. "I never died, Ethan." And somehow, that hurt more than anything else, because it meant everything he believed was wrong. Behind him, the little girl ran across the street and grabbed Naomi's arm. "Mom!" Ethan's eyes moved slowly between them. The woman he lost, and the child who called him daddy. His voice dropped. "Barely there. She called me that." Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them again, and said the words that changed everything. "Because you are." Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't think. Because in that moment, the life he had built, the power, the control, the empire, none of it mattered. Because standing in front of him, Ash was something he didn't even know he had lost. And the worst part? It had been taken from him. Was never written by me. Naomi's voice was quiet, but it hit like a collapse. Ethan blinked. "What?" "The letter," she said. "I didn't write it." Silence. Rain. Heartbeat. "That's not possible," Ethan said. But now he wasn't sure, because something inside him was starting to break open. And the truth was about to be much worse than he imagined. Ethan's mind refused to accept it, even as something deeper inside him already knew it was true. Because the version of Naomi he remembered would never have ended their life with a cold, lifeless letter. Not without a fight, not without looking him in the eyes one last time, not without asking him why he had changed. "You're lying," he said quietly, but his voice had lost its edge, lost its certainty. It like a man trying to hold on to a reality that was already slipping through his hands. Naomi didn't react. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at him with that same tired calm, the kind of calm that only comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. "You read it," she said, "but you never asked if it sounded like me." That sentence hit harder than anything else, because Ethan realized he hadn't asked, not really. He had accepted it because it made sense with the man he had become back then, obsessed with work, distant, distracted, already halfway gone even before she disappeared. The little girl stood quietly between them now, holding Naomi's sleeve, watching both of them like she was trying to understand a story she had been living in without ever hearing the beginning. Ethan ran a hand slowly over his face, rain mixing with something else he didn't want to name, then looked back at Naomi. "If you didn't write it, then who did?" he asked, and this time his voice was different, slower, controlled, but carrying something underneath it, something sharp, something dangerous. Naomi hesitated just for a second, like she was deciding how much truth to release at once. Then she said a name that felt too small for the damage it had caused. "Claire." Ethan blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "My assistant?" he asked almost automatically. Naomi nodded. "She came to me the day before you were supposed to leave for Chicago." Ethan's mind moved quickly now, piecing together fragments he hadn't thought about in years. Meetings, schedules, calls, a week that had blurred into nothing but pressure and ambition. "That doesn't make sense," he said. Naomi's voice stayed steady. "She told me you were leaving, not for a trip, for good." Ethan shook his head immediately. "No, I know," Naomi said softly, cutting him off without anger, without accusation, just truth. "But I didn't know that then." The rain tapped softly against the metal awning above them, the sound filling the silence that followed, a silence heavy with everything that had been misunderstood. "She said you didn't want to deal with a relationship slowing you down," Naomi continued, her eyes never leaving his. "That you asked her to handle everything, That you didn't want to see me again. Ethan's jaw tightened, his breath slowing, not because he was calm, but because something inside him was starting to focus, to narrow, the way it did right before a deal, right before a confrontation, right before something broke. And you believed her? He asked. Naomi didn't look away. Because of the way you had been acting, yes. That landed exactly where it needed to. Because again, it was true he had been distant, unavailable, already choosing his future without realizing what he was leaving behind. She gave me the letter, Naomi said you didn't have time to write it yourself. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, just one, and in that moment he saw it clearly. The version of himself back then. Too busy, too focused. Too certain that everything else could wait. I came to your office, Naomi added. Ethan's eyes opened again. What? I waited for 2 hours, she said, her voice quieter now. But you never came. Ethan's chest tightened because suddenly he remembered that day. The emergency meeting, the locked doors, the phones off, the world shut out while he chased something he thought mattered more. Claire told me you had already left, Naomi continued, that you didn't want to see me. Ethan took a small step back, like his body needed distance from the weight of what he was hearing. That's not true, he said again, but now it sounded weaker, not because he doubted it, but because it didn't matter anymore. The damage had already been done. I believed her, Naomi said simply. The little girl shifted slightly, her small hand tightening around her mother's coat, sort of sensing something heavy without understanding it. Ethan looked at her again. Really looked this time, at the shape of her face, the way she stood, the quiet strength in the way she tried not to take up too much space, and something inside him tightened in a way that had nothing to do with business, nothing to do with control, everything to do with loss. Why didn't you come back? He asked, his voice lower now. Naomi hesitated, then answered with a truth that landed even deeper than everything before it. Because I was pregnant. Ethan froze, not because the words shocked him, but because they completed something he had already begun to understand. I didn't know what to do, Naomi continued. I had no money, no support, and I believed you didn't want us. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. So you just disappeared? He asked. Naomi shook her head. I tried to reach you. Ethan's eyes snapped back to hers. What? I called your office, she said, more than once. Ethan's mind raced. I never got anything. Naomi gave a small, tired smile, because she answered every time. Claire. The name felt different now, heavier, darker, no longer just a memory, but a piece of something deliberate, something calculated. She told me you were busy, Naomi said, that you didn't want to be contacted, that you were focusing on your new life. Ethan's hands tightened slightly at his sides, not in explosive anger, but in something colder, something controlled, the kind of anger that didn't shout, didn't explode, just waited. Why? He asked, more to himself than to her. Naomi didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Ethan already knew the world he had been building back then. The kind of world where relationships were liabilities, where distractions were removed, where control mattered more than anything else. The rain grew heavier for a moment, then softened again, like the city itself was breathing around them. Where is she now? Ethan asked finally. Naomi frowned slightly. Who? Claire. Naomi studied him for a second. She doesn't work for you anymore? Ethan shook his head slowly. No. Naomi's expression shifted, just slightly. She should, she said quietly. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Naomi hesitated, then said something that made everything feel unfinished, incomplete, like they had only just touched the surface of something much bigger. She didn't do it alone. The air seemed to change around them, not louder, not more dramatic, just heavier, like something unseen had stepped closer. Ethan felt it before he turned, that instinct, that quiet warning that the next moment would matter. Where he turned slowly toward the street, and his body went completely still, because standing beside his car, holding an umbrella, watching everything, was Claire. She stood there calm, composed, untouched by the rain, like she had been expecting this exact moment, like she had been waiting for it. Ethan didn't speak immediately because for the first time in years, his mind wasn't moving at the speed of logic. It was slowing down, focusing, locking onto something that was no longer just about the past. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked finally, his voice low. Claire tilted her head slightly. "Long enough to know she told you." Naomi's hand tightened around her daughter's shoulder. Ethan stepped forward, not fast, not aggressive, but with a presence that made the space between them feel smaller. "You're going to explain this?" "Shumui," he said. Claire nodded once. "Of course, but not here." Ethan let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "You don't get to choose where this happens anymore." Claire's eyes didn't move. "Then you don't get the full truth." That stopped him. Not because it sounded like a threat, but because it sounded like control, and Ethan recognized control when he heard it. He looked back briefly at Naomi and the little girl, both watching, both waiting, both tied to whatever came next. Then he turned back to Claire. "Say it," he said. Claire's gaze flicked briefly toward Naomi, then back to him. "You really want to do this in front of them?" she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." Claire studied him for a second, then nodded. 7 years ago, she began. "You were about to sign the biggest deal of your life." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What does that have to do with anything?" Claire didn't react. "Everything," she said quietly. And in that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying. The life he had been living for 7 years might not have been built on truth at all. Ethan didn't interrupt her this time, not because he trusted her, but because something in her tone told him that whatever came next was going to change everything. The rain fell softly around them, the city still moving, but for Ethan, the world had narrowed again to just 3 people, and a truth he had never asked for. Claire stepped forward slightly, her voice calm, controlled, almost detached, like she had told herself this story too many times to feel it anymore. "That deal," she continued, "wasn't just important, it was everything." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know what it was," he said. Claire shook her head slightly. "No, you knew what it meant for your career, not what it meant for everyone around you." That sentence lingered. Ethan didn't respond. Claire continued. "The board didn't just want you focused. They wanted you clean, unpredictable, controllable." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Say what you're trying to say." Claire met his gaze directly. "Naomi didn't fit into that version of you." The words landed heavy, but not surprising, because deep down, Ethan already knew. Naomi had never cared about power, never cared about status. She had asked questions no one else dared to ask. She had seen parts of him he had buried long before the money came. Claire continued, "They saw her as a risk, someone who could pull you away, slow you down, make you hesitate." Ethan's voice dropped. "So they decided to remove her?" Claire didn't flinch. "They decided to make sure she wasn't there anymore when the deal was signed." Naomi's hand tightened slightly around her daughter. Ethan noticed it, and something inside him hardened. Not explosive anger, but something colder, more precise. "Who told you to do it?" he asked. Claire hesitated for the first time. Not long, but enough to matter. Then she said, "The board wasn't acting alone." Ethan's breath slowed. "Then who?" Claire's eyes didn't move. "Your father's partners." That hit differently. Not louder, not more dramatic, but deeper. Because those were the men who had built the foundation of everything Ethan now controlled. The men who had shaped the company before he ever took over. The men who still sat quietly behind decisions that looked like his. Ethan didn't speak for a second. He didn't need to. He understood exactly what that meant. Claire continued, "They didn't tell me to write a letter. They told me to make sure she was gone before you signed." Ethan's hands tightened slowly at his sides. "So you forged it?" Claire nodded once. "Yes, no apology, no hesitation. Just truth." Naomi looked down briefly, her expression unreadable, but her silence carried more weight than any reaction. Ethan exhaled slowly. "And the calls?" he asked. Claire's voice remained steady. "I answered them." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, just one, and in that second, 7 years collapsed into something sharp and clear. Not confusion anymore, not loss, but understanding. You separated us for a deal, he said. Claire shook her head slightly. For your future. Ethan's eyes opened again, colder now. You don't get to say that. Claire stepped closer, her tone still calm, but no longer distant. You got everything you wanted, Ethan. Power, control, influence. Everything you built after that deal came from that moment. Ethan's voice dropped. And I lost everything that mattered. The words came out before he could stop them. And the little girl shifted slightly, looking between them, sensing something she didn't understand. Claire's expression changed then, just slightly, not guilt, not regret, something more complicated. You didn't lose it, she said quietly. You never knew it was still there. That made Ethan pause, his eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, something protected from the rain. An envelope, worn, old, but carefully kept. Ethan stared at it, something about it pulling at him in a way he couldn't explain. Claire held it out. Because this, she said softly, is the letter she actually wrote. The world didn't explode, didn't collapse. It tightened, like everything inside Ethan had just been pulled into one single point. He didn't take it immediately. He looked at Naomi first. Her eyes were fixed on the envelope, her expression still, but her breathing slightly uneven. Ethan reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the paper, and the moment he touched it, something inside him shifted. Not dramatic, not loud, just undeniable. He opened it carefully, unfolding the page. It rained, threatening the edges. His eyes moved across the first line, then stopped. Because the handwriting wasn't typed, wasn't clean. It was real Naomi's. His throat tightened as he read. Ethan, if you're reading this, something went wrong. The words hit differently than anything before them, because they weren't cold. They weren't distant. They were alive, urgent, written by someone who still believed in him. He kept reading, slower now, every word cutting deeper. She wrote that Claire had come to see her, that something didn't feel right, that she didn't believe Ethan would end their life through someone else, that she was going to come to his office and speak to him directly. Ethan swallowed hard. The memory of that day came back stronger now, clearer, sharper. Naomi's voice continued through the letter, even though she wasn't speaking. Only if you receive any other message, don't believe it. His hand tightened slightly on the paper. The rain faded into the background. Everything else disappeared. Only the words remained. The last part hit him the hardest. I don't care about the deal or the pressure or what anyone else wants. I only care if you still know who you are. If you do, come find me. I'll be waiting. Ethan lowered the paper slowly. For a moment, no one spoke. Not Naomi, not Claire, not even the child. Because something had just been undone. Not repaired, not fixed, but undone. 7 years of belief, 7 years of silence, 7 years of building a life on something that was never real. Ethan looked up at Claire. His voice was quiet. Why didn't you destroy it? Claire's umbrella shifted slightly as the rain tapped against it. For the first time, her composure cracked, just slightly, because I knew what I was doing was wrong. Ethan didn't react. Claire continued. Not at first. At first, I told myself it was business, that powerful men make decisions like this all the time, that people like me just carry them out. But when I saw her waiting for you that day, when I saw how long she stayed, I knew. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, the memory still alive. Ethan's jaw tightened. You knew, he repeated. Claire nodded. Yes, and you still let it happen. This time, Claire didn't defend herself. Yes, the honesty made it heavier, not lighter. Ethan folded the letter carefully, like it mattered more than anything else he had touched in years. Why are you here now? He asked. Claire looked at him for a long second. Because they're moving again. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who? Claire didn't hesitate this time. The same men. Naomi's expression shifted immediately. She understood. Ethan felt something settle inside him. Something familiar, something controlled, but now tied to something deeply personal. Explain, he said. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. 3 weeks ago, They started preparing a new deal, one that requires land they don't fully control. Ethan's mind moved quickly. He already knew where this was going. Mercer Street, he said. Claire nodded. Naomi looked between them, confused. What does that have to do with me? Claire's eyes shifted to her. Because you own the last piece they need. Silence. Naomi's hand tightened around her daughter. That's not possible, she said. It is, Claire replied calmly. And they already know it's yours. Ethan turned slowly toward Naomi. Is it true? Naomi hesitated, then nodded. A small building, it was left to me. I never thought it mattered. Ethan exhaled slowly, but now it mattered more than anything. Claire continued. They were going to buy it quietly, through pressure, fear, whatever it took. But then they realized who you were. Naomi's face changed. They came to see me, she said softly. Ethan's eyes sharpened. When? 2 days ago, Naomi replied. A man said my building had violations, said I should sell before the city shut it down. And when I refused, she paused, her voice tightening slightly. He mentioned her by name. Ethan's gaze snapped to the little girl. The air changed instantly. What did he say? He asked, his voice lower now. Naomi swallowed. That accidents happen, especially to people who don't cooperate. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but something inside him changed. Not gradually, instantly. Because this was no longer about the past. This was about now, about them, about a child standing in the rain who had just called him daddy. Ethan's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Decision. They won't touch her, he said quietly. Naomi shook her head. You can't promise that. Ethan looked at her, really looked this time. I can. Naomi held his gaze, searching for something, maybe doubt, maybe hesitation, but there was none, only certainty. Then Claire watched both of them, then said quietly, You need to move fast. Ethan nodded slightly. I know. He looked back at Naomi. You're coming with me. Naomi shook her head immediately. No. Ethan didn't raise his voice. You're not safe here. I'm not safe in your world either, she replied. That landed, because again, she wasn't wrong. Ethan paused for a second, then said something different, something that didn't sound like control. Then let me make it safe. Naomi didn't answer immediately. The rain softened around them. The little girl looked up at both of them, her voice small but clear. Are we going to be okay? And in that moment, everything stopped again, because the answer to that question would change everything that came next. Ethan didn't answer her immediately, not because he didn't want to, but because for the first time in years, his words actually mattered to someone who would believe them completely, and that made them heavier than any promise he had ever made in a boardroom. He looked down at her, really looked this time, at the way she held onto Naomi's coat, at the quiet fear in her eyes, at the strength she was trying to hide, and something inside him shifted in a way that had nothing to do with power. Yes, he said finally, his voice low but steady. You're going to be okay. The girl studied his face for a second, as if testing the truth of it, then gave a small nod, like she had decided to trust him without fully understanding why. Naomi watched that moment closely, because trust like that didn't come from logic. It came from something deeper. It's something she wasn't ready to name yet. Ethan straightened slightly, his attention returning to the situation, but now everything felt different, sharper, more personal. You can't stay here, he said to Naomi. She shook her head again, instinctively resisting. I've managed this long without you. Ethan didn't argue with that because, again, it was true she had survived alone, without him, without support, without the life they were supposed to build together. But surviving wasn't the same as being safe. That was before they knew who you were, he said quietly. Naomi hesitated just for a second. Claire stepped in, her voice calm but direct. They won't stop now, Naomi. Not after the deal is this close. Naomi looked at her sharply. You don't get to say my name like that after what you did. Claire didn't defend herself. She simply nodded once, accepting it. You're right, she said. But I'm still telling you the truth. The tension hung in the air, heavy but controlled. Ethan stepped forward slightly. not closing the distance completely, but enough to make it clear he wasn't stepping back anymore. "You don't have to trust me yet," he said, "but trust this. They won't hesitate to use you if you stay here." Naomi's hand tightened around her daughter's shoulder. The girl leaned into her slightly, sensing the shift again. "Then what are you suggesting?" Naomi asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Come with me, just for tonight." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. "To your mansion?" "No," Ethan said immediately. "Not there." That surprised her. She had expected control, expected him to pull her into his world without asking. Instead, he adjusted. Claire watched that closely, noticing the difference. "There's a private clinic," Ethan continued. "No board connections, no media, no one who reports back to them. You get checked, you rest, and we figure out the next move from there." Naomi hesitated again, this time longer. Her instinct told her to say no, to stay in control, to not step into anything connected to him. But another part of her, quieter, more honest, knew she was tired, knew she couldn't keep pushing through this alone. Not with her body starting to fail, not with the pressure building around her. "Mom?" the little girl whispered softly, looking up at her. Naomi closed her eyes for a second, just one, then opened them again. "One night," she said. Ethan nodded once. One night. There was no victory in his expression, no sense of control, just a decision. He turned slightly toward the street. "Driver?" "See," he called. The car door opened immediately. The driver stepped out with an umbrella, moving quickly but quietly. Ethan looked down at the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered softly, "Lily." The name settled into him instantly, heavier than anything else that had happened that night. "Lily," he repeated, like he was making sure it was real. She nodded. Ethan removed his coat without thinking and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. She looked surprised, then small inside it. "It's too big," she said quietly. Ethan gave a faint, almost invisible smile. "You'll grow into it." She didn't fully understand, but she held it tighter anyway. Naomi watched that moment again, something shifting inside her, something she didn't want to acknowledge yet. They moved toward the car together, not as strangers anymore, but not as a family either. Something in between, something fragile. Claire followed a step behind, silent. As they reached the car, Ethan paused, his instincts flickering. That quiet awareness he had learned over years of high-stakes decisions. Something about the air felt different. Not wrong, but watched. He turned slightly, scanning the street. For a second, he saw nothing. Just wet pavement, passing headlights, distant figures. But then, a reflection, subtle, almost invisible. A phone lowering across the street. Someone had been watching. Ethan didn't react outwardly, didn't alert anyone. But the information locked into place instantly. They weren't early. They were already late. He opened the car door for Naomi and Lily first. Naomi hesitated for half a second before stepping in, still unsure, still guarded. Lily climbed in beside her, clutching the coat. Ethan followed, closing the door behind him. Claire entered last. The car pulled away smoothly, blending back into the city like nothing had happened. Inside, the silence was different now. Not empty, but full. Lily sat quietly, looking between them, her small fingers still gripping the fabric of the coat. Naomi leaned back slightly, one hand resting protectively over her. Ethan sat across from them, his posture still, his eyes focused, but his mind moving faster than ever. "We need to move off main roads," he said to the driver. "Yes, sir." The route shifted immediately. Claire watched him. "You saw it too," she said quietly. Ethan didn't look at her. "We were being watched before we left." Naomi's expression tightened. "What does that mean?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "It means they already know something changed tonight." Lily looked up again. "Who knows?" she asked softly. Ethan met her eyes. "People who don't matter," he said. Now, but his tone carried something else, something firm. She nodded slowly, accepting it. The car moved through quieter streets now, the city lights reflecting off the wet glass. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice lower. "Claire, how fast can they move?" Claire thought for a second. "If they have photos, hours, maybe less." Naomi's hand tightened again. Photos, she repeated. Ethan didn't hide it. Someone took them across the street. Naomi's breath caught slightly. So this is already starting, Claire finished. Silence followed. Ethan leaned back again, but his eyes didn't lose focus. Then we move faster, he said. Claire nodded. What's your play? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Lily, at the way she was trying to stay quiet, trying not to interrupt, or trying to understand a situation no child should ever have to understand. Then he looked at Naomi, at the exhaustion in her face, the strength she had held on to for 7 years without him, and in that moment, the decision formed completely. We don't hide this, he said. Naomi looked at him sharply. What? Ethan's voice didn't rise. We don't let them control the story. Naomi shook her head immediately. No, you don't get to turn this into something public. Ethan held her gaze. It already is. Naomi's expression hardened. That doesn't mean we make it worse. Claire spoke quietly. It won't make it worse. It will change who controls it. Naomi looked at her, then back at Ethan. You think going public protects us? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. It makes it harder to hurt you without consequences. Naomi hesitated, because that logic made sense, even if she didn't want it to. Lily looked between them again. Are we famous now? She asked softly. The question was innocent, but it broke the tension for a second. Ethan looked at her, and this time, there was something warmer in his expression. Not the kind that matters, he said. She nodded, satisfied enough. The car slowed as they turned onto a narrow street. We're here, the driver said. Ethan stepped out first, scanning again, more carefully this time. The clinic was quiet, almost hidden, exactly what he wanted. He opened the door. Naomi stepped out slowly, her balance slightly unsteady. Ethan noticed immediately, his hand moving instinctively before stopping himself, giving her space. Lily followed, still wrapped in his coat. Inside, the warmth hit them instantly. A woman behind the desk looked up, her eyes sharp, observant. You don't come here for small problems, she said to Ethan. I don't, he replied. She nodded once. Then let's not waste time. Naomi was guided into a room, Lily staying close. Ethan remained near the door, watching, not interfering, but not looking away either. Claire stood beside him, quiet. After a few minutes, the doctor stepped back, her expression serious. She's exhausted, dehydrated, and running a fever, she said. Naomi started to speak, but the doctor raised a hand. You've been pushing too long. Ethan's jaw tightened. What does she need? Rest and no stress, the doctor replied. Ethan almost smiled at that, but there was no humor in it. No stress wasn't possible anymore. Naomi shook her head slightly. I can't stay. Ethan looked at her. You have to. I can't, she repeated. Ethan stepped closer, his voice lower now. Then stay for her. Naomi hesitated. Lily looked up at her. Please, Mom. Naomi closed her eyes again, then nodded slightly. One night, she said. Ethan stepped back, relief moving quietly through him. But just as the room settled, his phone vibrated. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and everything shifted again. A headline, a photo. Him in the rain, Naomi beside him, Lily in his coat. The words below it were already spreading, already shaping the story. Ethan looked up slowly. Claire read it over his shoulder. It's out, she said quietly. Naomi saw it next. Her face didn't show shock, just confirmation. So it begins, she said. Ethan locked the phone, his expression changing, not into panic, but into something far more controlled. No, he said quietly. Now it changes. Ethan didn't move for a second after reading the headline, not because he was surprised, but because he was calculating, the way he always did when something shifted too fast for anyone else to keep up. Naomi watched him carefully, expecting panic, expecting damage control, expecting the same cold businessman she once knew to take over. But what she saw instead was something different, something quieter, something more focused. What does it say? She asked. Ethan handed her the phone without a word. Her eyes moved across the screen, the image of them in the rain frozen in time, her hand gripping Lily, His face turned toward them. The moment already turned into a story they didn't control. She read the headlines slowly, her lips tightening. A billionaire linked to secret family amid controversial deal. Lily leaned slightly closer, trying to see. "Is that us?" she asked softly. Naomi lowered the phone, not answering immediately. Ethan took it back, locking the screen again. "Yes," he said calmly. Lily blinked, processing it in her own way, then asked, "Are we in trouble?" The question landed again, simple but heavy. Ethan crouched slightly to meet her eyes. "No," he said, steady, certain. "We're just getting started." Naomi looked at him sharply at that, because that didn't sound like fear. It sounded like intention. Claire stepped closer, her voice low. "They moved faster than I thought." Ethan nodded. "Good." Naomi frowned. "Good?" she repeated. Ethan looked at her. They showed their hand first. Naomi shook her head. "This isn't a game, Ethan." His voice softened slightly, but the focus didn't leave his eyes. "I know, that's why we don't let them control it." Claire watched him carefully. "What are you going to do?" Ethan didn't hesitate this time. "We take it away from them." Naomi's expression tightened. "Take what?" "The story," he said. She stared at him. "You think you can just rewrite this?" Ethan's answer came quietly. "Not rewrite, replace." That word lingered. Claire understood immediately. Naomi didn't, not yet. "You're going public," Claire said. Ethan nodded once. Naomi shook her head instantly. "No." Ethan didn't react. "They already made it public," he said. Naomi's voice rose slightly. "That doesn't mean you turn our lives into headlines." Ethan held her gaze. "It means if we stay silent, they decide what those headlines say next." Naomi hesitated because she knew that was true, even if she hated it. Lily looked between them again, her voice smaller this time. "Why are people talking about us?" Ethan turned to her again, his tone shifting instantly. "Because they don't know the truth yet." Lily tilted her head slightly. "So we tell them?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Exactly." Naomi watched that exchange, something inside her shifting again, not trust fully, but something closer, something beginning. Claire stepped in. "If we do this, it has to be fast, before they build the narrative." Ethan turned to her. "I know." He pulled out his phone again, scrolling quickly, ignoring the flood of messages, calls, alerts, investors, executives, reporters, all trying to reach him at once. None of them mattered right now. He stopped on one contact. Claire noticed. "You're calling him?" she asked quietly. Ethan didn't look at her. "He owes me." He pressed call. It rang once, twice, then connected. "You don't call this late unless something's wrong," a voice said. Ethan's reply was immediate. "I need a controlled release. Within 2 hours." A pause. "Of what?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "A statement confirming I have a daughter and that her mother owns the final Mercer parcel." Naomi's head snapped toward him. "What?" She said. Claire's eyes widened slightly. Even she hadn't expected that. The voice on the phone went quiet for a second longer. "That's not damage control," it said. "That's escalation." Ethan's tone stayed calm. "That's leverage." Naomi shook her head. "You don't get to decide this without me." Ethan looked at her. "Then decide with me right now." Silence. Naomi held his gaze, searching for manipulation, for control, for the man she used to know. Instead, she saw something else, something steadier. "If we do this," she said slowly, "it's not about your company." Ethan nodded. "It's about you and her." Naomi continued. "No lies, no half-truths, no making yourself look better." Ethan didn't hesitate. Agreed. Claire watched him closely because that wasn't something the old Ethan would have said so easily. Naomi took a breath. "Count on, and if this brings danger to her," she glanced at Lily. "We stop." Ethan's answer came instantly. "Then we stop." The moment settled. Not agreement, not peace, but alignment. Naomi gave a small nod. "Then we tell the truth." Ethan turned back to the phone. "You heard that?" he said. The voice on the other end replied, "I did, and you're making this harder than it needs to be." Ethan's tone sharpened slightly. No, I'm making it real. A pause, then, you'll need proof. Ethan glanced at Naomi, then at Lily. You'll have it. In timing? The voice asked. Ethan looked at the clock. 2 hours. You're asking for a storm, the voice warned. Ethan's reply was simple. They already started it. The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Naomi watched him. What happens now, she asked. Ethan's eyes didn't move. Now they react. Claire nodded slightly. And we stay ahead. The room grew quieter. The doctor adjusted something near Naomi, keeping an eye on her condition. Lily yawned softly, the exhaustion finally catching up to her. Naomi pulled her closer. Ethan stepped back slightly, giving them space, but his attention never left. His phone vibrated again. A new message. Unknown number. He opened it. One sentence. You should have stayed out of this. Ethan stared at it for a second, then locked the screen. Claire saw his expression. Threat? She asked. Ethan nodded once. Naomi's voice tightened. What does it say? Ethan looked at her. That we made the right move? Naomi didn't look convinced. That doesn't sound reassuring. Ethan's tone stayed calm. It means they're reacting, not controlling. Claire crossed her arms slightly, and that means they'll move faster now. Ethan nodded. Good. Naomi exhaled slowly. You keep saying that like it's a good thing. Ethan looked at her, really looked this time, because the faster they move, the more mistakes they make. Naomi held his gaze. For the first time, she didn't argue. Lily shifted slightly, her eyes half closed now. Are we going home? She asked sleepily. Naomi brushed her hair gently. Not yet. Ethan stepped closer, his voice softer. You can rest here tonight. Lily nodded slowly, trusting the answer without question. Ethan looked at both of them, something steady settling inside him. Not control, not ambition, responsibility. Claire watched him. They're not going to stop, she said quietly. Ethan didn't look away. Neither am I. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, the city lights reflecting off wet streets, calm on the surface. But underneath, everything was moving. Somewhere, phones were ringing, meetings were starting, decisions were being made. The men who had controlled everything for years were already adjusting to a version of Ethan they had never faced before. Not the ambitious one, not the predictable one, but one with something to lose, and that made him dangerous. Ethan's phone lit up again. Another call. This time, a name he recognized instantly. One of the board members. One of the men behind everything. Ethan stared at it for a second, then answered. It's you're making a mistake, the voice said immediately. Ethan's reply was calm. No, I'm correcting one. Silence then. You don't understand what you're triggering. Ethan's eyes moved briefly to Naomi, then to Lily. I understand exactly. The voice lowered. You think this makes you stronger? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. I don't care if it makes me stronger. A pause, it makes them safe. Silence again, heavier this time. Then, we'll talk in the morning. The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Naomi watched him. That was them, she asked. Ethan nodded. One of them. Naomi's voice was quiet. And now? Ethan's expression didn't change. Now they stopped hiding. The room fell silent again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. Because whatever came next wouldn't stay quiet anymore. The room didn't feel like a clinic anymore. It felt like the center of something much bigger, something already moving beyond those walls. And Ethan could feel it, not as fear, but as pressure building in every direction. Naomi sat back against the pillow, her body finally starting to give in to exhaustion, but her mind still alert, still watching him, still trying to understand what kind of man he had become in her absence. Lily had drifted half asleep, her small hand still holding onto the sleeve of Ethan's coat, like letting go might change everything again. Claire stood near the window, scanning the quiet street outside, her instincts sharp, her attention split between what was happening inside and what was coming next. Ethan remained still for a moment, then stepped closer to Naomi, his voice lower now, calmer but carrying weight. Wait, you need to rest, he said. Naomi looked at him, her expression softer but still guarded. Rest doesn't stop what's coming, she replied. Ethan nodded slightly. No, but it helps you face it. Naomi held his gaze, then slowly leaned back again, not fully trusting, but no longer resisting. The doctor adjusted the IV, checking her vitals, then glanced at Ethan. She'll be okay tonight, but only if she actually rests. Ethan nodded once. She will. The doctor didn't question it, but she studied him for a second longer, like she understood that whatever was happening here wasn't just medical. Then she stepped out, leaving the door slightly open. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with everything that had already changed. Ethan turned slightly toward Claire. We don't wait for morning, he said quietly. Claire nodded. They won't. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Then we stay ahead of them. Claire crossed her arms slightly. You already forced them to react. What's next? Ethan didn't answer immediately because he wasn't thinking in steps anymore. He was thinking in layers, in moves and counter-moves, in outcomes that hadn't happened yet but already existed in his mind. We removed their options, he said finally. Claire tilted her head slightly. How? Ethan's voice stayed calm. We make it impossible for them to touch Naomi or Lily without exposing themselves. Claire's expression shifted. That means more visibility, more pressure. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Naomi opened her eyes slightly, listening. You're turning us into a shield, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her. I'm turning you into something they can't hide from. Naomi studied him, researching again for manipulation, for control. But what she saw didn't feel like that. It felt different. And if it backfires, she asked? Ethan didn't hesitate. Then it backfires on me, not on you. That landed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Lily stirred slightly, her voice soft, barely awake. Are we still okay? Ethan stepped closer again, crouching beside her. We are, he said. She nodded slowly, trusting him without needing more. Ethan stood again, turning back toward Claire. Get me everything you have on the board members connected to Mercer, he said. Claire didn't hesitate. I can start now, but it won't be complete until morning. Ethan shook his head slightly. I don't need complete. I need enough. Claire nodded. Then give me 30 minutes. She stepped out into the hallway, already pulling out her phone. Her mind moving fast, connecting pieces she had ignored for too long. Ethan remained inside, alone now with Naomi and Lily. The room felt quieter, more personal. Naomi watched him for a moment before speaking. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately because the question wasn't simple, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to give a simple answer. He looked at Lily first, then back at Naomi. Because I should have been here 7 years ago, he said quietly. Naomi's expression shifted slightly, something softer, something harder to ignore. That doesn't change what happened, she said. Ethan nodded. I know. A pause. But it changes what happens next. Naomi looked away briefly, then back at him. You can't fix everything, Ethan. His voice stayed steady. I'm not trying to fix everything. Just the part that matters now. Lily's breathing slowed, deeper now, fully asleep. Naomi watched her, her hand gently brushing her hair. She's all I had, she said softly. Ethan's throat tightened slightly. She's not all you have anymore. And Naomi didn't respond. Not because she disagreed, but because she wasn't ready to accept it yet. The door opened quietly. Claire stepped back in, her expression sharper now, more focused. You were right, she said. Ethan looked at her. I usually am. Claire didn't react to that. They've already started moving assets, quietly, through shell companies. Ethan nodded slightly. To secure the land? Claire shook her head. To control the fallout, legal teams, media connections, pressure points. Ethan's eyes narrowed. And Naomi? Claire's voice lowered. They've assigned a private firm, unofficial, no records tied directly to them. Naomi's hand tightened again. Ethan noticed. What kind of firm? He asked. Claire met his gaze. The kind that doesn't need permission. Silence fell, heavier this time. Ethan's expression didn't change outwardly. but something inside him locked into place. Then we escalate, he said. Naomi looked at him sharply. Escalate how? Ethan turned to her. We don't just defend, we expose. Claire nodded slightly. You're going after them directly. Ethan's voice stayed calm. They already came after us. Naomi shook her head. That's dangerous. Ethan looked at her, so was doing nothing. Naomi held his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't argue, because she knew he was right. Claire stepped closer. If you do this, there's no going back. Ethan almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. There wasn't a way back the moment she called me daddy. The words hung in the air, quiet but heavy. Naomi closed her eyes for a second, just one, then opened them again. This time, something had changed. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Then we do it, she said. The Ethan nodded once. Then we do it right. His phone vibrated again. This time, a message from his contact. Statement is live. Ethan opened it, read it once, then turned the screen toward Claire. She scanned it quickly. It's clean, direct, no spin. Ethan nodded. Good. Naomi looked at it next, her eyes moving slowly across the words. This time, it wasn't someone else telling her story. It was hers. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something being taken from her. It felt like something being returned. Outside, the city had changed again. Headlines spreading, conversations shifting, narratives breaking apart. The story was no longer theirs to control, but it was no longer controlled by the wrong people either. Ethan locked the phone, his expression steady. Now they move, he said. Claire nodded, and we're ready. Naomi looked at him. Are we? Ethan met her eyes. We have to be. The room fell quiet again. But this time it wasn't uncertainty. It was the moment before something bigger. Because somewhere out there, decisions were already being made. And this time, Ethan wasn't reacting anymore. He was leading. And that changed everything. The silence didn't last long. It never does when powerful people realize they're losing control. Ethan felt it before the first call came in. That quiet shift in the air. That invisible pressure tightening around everything. His phone lit up again. Another number. Unknown. He answered this one without hesitation. You've made this public, the voice said. Calm but colder than before. Not emotional. Not loud. Controlled. Dangerous. Ethan didn't sit down. He stood still near the window, eyes on the dark street outside. It was already public, he replied. I just made it honest. A short pause, then a quiet exhale on the other end. You think honesty protects you? Ethan's voice didn't change. No, but it removes your advantage. That landed, not loudly, but enough. The man on the other end didn't respond immediately this time, and that told Ethan everything. They were adjusting, which meant they were already behind. You're exposing more than you understand, the voice said finally. Ethan glanced briefly at Naomi, then at Lily, still asleep, still peaceful. No, he said, I'm protecting what you tried to hide. Silence again. Then the line went dead. No goodbye. No warning, just control, pulling back. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Claire stepped closer. That wasn't just a warning, she said. Ethan nodded. It was a test. Naomi watched them both. And, she asked. Ethan's eyes sharpened slightly. They're not sure how far I'll go yet. Claire crossed her arms. Then we show them. Ethan didn't answer, because something else was already happening. His phone buzzed again. This time not a call. Messages, dozens, then hundreds. News outlets, business partners, investors. And then something else. Claire stepped closer, looking at the screen. It's spreading faster than expected, she said. Ethan scrolled once, then stopped. A new headline. Bigger, sharper, more direct. Billionaire claims hidden. Daughter questions rise about board manipulation. Naomi leaned slightly forward. They're turning it, she said. As Claire nodded. They're trying to shift focus from your story to his credibility. Ethan didn't react outwardly, but inside everything aligned. Good, he said again. Naomi frowned. You keep saying that. Ethan looked at her. Because they're reacting emotionally now, Claire added quietly, which means they're making mistakes. Naomi exhaled slowly. And what happens when those mistakes hurt us? Ethan stepped closer this time. Not too close, but enough. Then I make sure it hurts them more. Naomi held his gaze, searching again, testing again. But this time she didn't push back, because something in his voice had changed. It wasn't ambition, it wasn't ego, it was something far more dangerous. Commitment. Lily shifted slightly in her sleep. Her hand loosened from the coat for a second, then tightened again. Like instinct, like memory. Ethan noticed it, and something inside him locked even deeper. Claire's phone buzzed now. She checked it quickly, then looked up. They've deployed the firm? The room changed instantly. Naomi's hand moved to Lily. Protective. Automatic. Ethan didn't move. Location? He asked. Claire's voice stayed calm. 2 blocks out, maybe less. Naomi's breath caught slightly. Already? Ethan nodded once. They're not waiting. Claire stepped closer to the door, checking the hallway. We still have time, but not much. Ethan turned toward Naomi. We're moving. Naomi didn't argue this time. Not immediately. Where? She asked. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Somewhere they can't follow. Claire looked at him. You mean off-grid? Ethan nodded. For tonight. Naomi shook her head slightly. Running doesn't solve this. Ethan's voice stayed steady. This isn't running. A pause, it's positioning. That word landed differently. Naomi understood it now. Not fully, but enough. Claire spoke again. If we stay, they'll close the distance. Ethan nodded, then looked at Naomi. We leave now, or we let them control the next move. Naomi looked down at Lily, then back at him. A long second passed, then she nodded. We go. That was it. No hesitation after that. Ethan moved instantly. Claire cleared the exit. She was already moving, phone in hand, quiet, fast. Ethan stepped toward Naomi, helping her up this time. She didn't pull away, not anymore. Lily stirred as Naomi lifted her gently. Mom? She whispered. It's okay, Naomi said softly. We're just going somewhere safe. Lily nodded sleepily. Trusting, always trusting. Ethan opened the door slightly, checked the hallway. Clear for now. Claire returned. Back exit, no cameras. But we have maybe 3 minutes. Ethan didn't waste one of them. Let's move. They stepped into the hallway, quiet, controlled, no rushing, no panic, because panic makes noise, and noise gets noticed. The lights flickered slightly as they passed. The building felt too still now, too quiet, like something was already closing in. Naomi held Lily close. Ethan stayed just ahead, Claire behind them, watching everything. They reached the back door. Claire opened it slowly. The cool night air rushed in. Empty alley, no movement. Go, she said. Ethan stepped out first, scanned, left, right, clear, for now. But Naomi followed, then Claire. The door closed softly behind them, and in that moment, everything shifted again. Because this time, they weren't reacting anymore. They were moving first, but somewhere, not far away, someone else was moving too. And this time, it wasn't just about control anymore. It was about stopping Ethan before he exposed everything. The alley was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel safe, it feels watched. Ethan stepped forward first, his movements controlled, eyes scanning every shadow, every reflection on the wet pavement. Naomi followed close behind, holding Lily tightly against her chest, the child half asleep but instinctively clinging to her. Claire stayed a step behind them, her attention constantly shifting, checking angles, exits, timing. No one spoke. And because this wasn't the moment for words, this was the moment where one mistake could end everything. At the end of the alley, a car waited. Not the Rolls-Royce, smaller, unmarked, already running. Ethan had planned faster than anyone realized. He opened the back door immediately. Get in, he said quietly. Naomi didn't hesitate this time. She stepped in with Lily, pulling her close. Claire followed. Ethan entered last. The door shut. The car pulled away instantly. No headlights flashed behind them. No sudden movement. But that didn't mean they were safe. It just meant the other side was patient. Inside the car, Lily shifted slightly, her voice soft and confused. "Are we going home now?" Naomi brushed her hair gently. "Somewhere better," she whispered. Lily nodded, trusting again, and rested her head against Naomi's shoulder. He heard Ethan watch that moment in silence. Then he looked away, because something inside him was getting heavier. Not pressure, responsibility. Claire leaned slightly forward. "They won't chase directly," she said. "Not yet." Ethan nodded. "They'll wait. Watch where we go." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then we disappear before they understand the pattern." Ethan didn't answer, because he already had. The car turned twice, then 3 times, then merged into a darker road where traffic thinned and the city lights faded behind them. Naomi finally spoke. "Where are we going?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Somewhere they don't expect." Naomi studied him. "You've done this before." A small pause. Ethan didn't deny it. Not like this. That answer stayed in the air, because this wasn't business anymore. This was personal. The car slowed as they approached a gated property hidden behind tall trees. No lights outside, no sign, just silence. The gate opened before they even stopped. They drove in. The door closed behind them. Now they were truly out of sight. For the first time that night, the tension shifted. Not gone, but contained. The car stopped in front of a low modern house. No guards visible, no staff waiting, just quiet control. Ethan stepped out first, then opened the door for Naomi. She stepped out slowly, still holding Lily, who barely woke. Claire followed, scanning the area one more time. "No immediate tail," she said. Ethan nodded. "Good." They entered the house. Warm light, clean space, no noise. Safe, for now. Naomi looked around, her expression unreadable. "Whose place is this?" Ethan answered simply. "Mine." She frowned slightly. "You said not your world." Ethan met her eyes. "This isn't that world." She didn't fully understand yet, but she felt the difference. No luxury display, no staff, no cameras in obvious corners. Just privacy. Lily stirred again as Naomi set her gently on a couch. "Mom." Naomi knelt beside her. "Sleep," she whispered. Lily nodded, already drifting again. Ethan stood there watching. Then he said something quietly. "Her name fits her." Naomi looked up. "You heard it once?" Ethan shook his head slightly. That was enough. Silence. Then Naomi asked the question she had been holding back. "What happens now?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window, looked out into the darkness beyond the glass. Then he spoke. "No more. Now we stop reacting." Claire leaned slightly against the wall. "Meaning?" Ethan turned back slowly. "Meaning we end it." Naomi's expression tightened. "End what?" Ethan's eyes locked onto hers. "Them." The word landed heavy. Not violent, but final. Naomi shook her head slightly. "You can't just..." Ethan stepped closer. "They took 7 years from us." A pause. "I'm not giving them another day." Claire watched him carefully. This wasn't the same man she had worked for. Not even close. This one was, focused differently, more dangerous. "Then we do it clean," Claire said quietly. Ethan nodded. "We expose everything." Naomi's breath slowed. "Everything?" Ethan didn't look away. The letter, the calls, the deal, the pressure, a pause, all of it. Naomi hesitated, because this wasn't just truth anymore. This was war. "And my part in it?" she asked. Ethan's voice softened slightly. "You didn't do anything wrong." Naomi shook her head. "That's not how the world sees it." Ethan stepped closer again. "Then we change how the world sees it." That was the moment. The shift. Naomi looked at him. Really looked this time. Not the billionaire. Not the man who disappeared. But the man standing here now. And for the first time she believed him. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. "Okay," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. That was all he needed. Claire pushed off the wall. Then we moved tonight. Ethan looked at her. We already did. He picked up his phone. Dozens of messages, hundreds now, but one thread stood out. Encrypted, private. He opened it. Typed one line. I'm ready. Then he hit send. Claire watched him. That's it? Ethan nodded. That's the beginning. Outside, far beyond the trees, the cars moved. Phones rang. Orders were given. Because the other side had realized something too late. Ethan wasn't protecting a deal anymore. He was protecting a family, and that made him something they had never planned for. Unpredictable, uncontrolled, and impossible to stop. Inside the house, Lily slept peacefully for the first time that night. Naomi sat beside her. Ethan stood a few steps away. Not close, not distant, just there. And after 7 years, that was enough to change everything. What would you have done if you were him? Would you walk away from everything you built, or fight for something you didn't even know you had? And one more question. Do you think Claire deserves forgiveness? Or did she cross a line that can never be undone? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes the life we think we lost is just waiting for us to find it again.